All right, everybody, welcome. So we are, Joe, who are we?
We are the 4-Shift Mind Body Badge. My name is Sergeant Valentine, and I got Dr. Luke here. We have a special guest as well today.
So between the two beards today is Mrs. Jessica Wright. She is our lead mental health person at Vandalia Correctional Center and also does a lot of work on the outside and has all kinds of tons of expertise and training. So that's why we brought her in here to talk about a couple areas of wellness. But before we get into that stuff, let's catch everybody up. What's been going on since the last podcast at Decatur?
Yeah, Decatur podcast. We did that one right now. There is, so if we start whispering, because I know Luke likes to whisper in these videos, we have a CF2F class happening right to the right of us. So that's happening. So CF2F is still all over the place in the central region, up north, and in the southern region. So if you have not signed up for CF2F, I encourage you to go ahead and sign up. And every facility is different. Sometimes it's the facility coordinator. Sometimes it's the training lieutenant or the training person. Sometimes it's the warden secretary. I know at our facility. So touch base with your facility coordinator and find out who you need to meet with to sign up for the class.
What are some of the misconceptions about who can go to the class, or some of the reasons maybe people didn't go or had a delay? What have you heard?
Sometimes people will say they're too new, right? So being too new in corrections, they think they haven't had a chance to earn the chance to take the class. Some people think, well, I've been here long enough. I don't need it because I'm getting ready to retire. So those are the two big ones for me. That I've heard when I've gone to different facilities. I disagree with both of those. Essentially, understand this. You're never too new to take this class. A lot of the people who take the class who are getting ready to retire will say, God, I wish I had taken the class within
the class
the
is
year.
really aimed at, again, not just security, but anyone working in a prison from day one to day 25 years or whatever.
Yeah, because our different jobs affect us differently, right? So if you're in clinical services, if you're a teacher, if you're a chaplain, if you work in records, even if you're a warden secretary, or even if you are the warden, this class is geared towards everyone who works inside the facility.
And they even had classes at least running at one time for retirees.
Yes, yeah.
And so from time to time, I know they'll put that back on depending upon interest and need, but we do have some higher level trainers that run those classes. I've also heard, people just saying, well, I didn't think I could get permission to go. So not just new or late. I thought I had to be on staff wellness to go to this training, or a number of different things. The best thing, like Joe pointed out, find your facility coordinator or backup, figure out where that sign-in sheet is, sign in. Now, obviously, there could be conflict scheduling. We got to keep our facilities running, but our wardens, I think, have been given marching orders that this is important, so they're going to also try to make efforts to get you in there, but be flexible on a couple of different locations. And it's a 2-day,
2-day class offsite. One thing we're also in the process of working on as well is CF2F for families. So that'll be for our spouses to go to, and this class will be geared towards.
Well, that means I have to babysit. My wife's not going.
The changes that the spouses are going to have to realize and understand, and how they cope with the changes that we have at our facilities by starting the job. My wife said straight up, it was like walking on eggshells, right? She had to always make sure the kids were quiet. She knew I was touchy or maybe emotional or always angry. And so before I took the class, the best way she described it as to find out what triggered me, right? And this class isn't to find out what triggered. It's supposed to help us both come together as her on the spouse end of the CF2F class and me who works in security. So we're going to combine it to both and how we can get along and how we can work through things. And I think that's kind of going to be the topics we're going to talk about today, is just relationships, right?
Yeah,
we're gonna dive deep on that.
Joe and I'd like to call us relationship connoisseurs and experts.
That pink shirt, yep.
But if you take our advice, you run the risk of taking our advice.
Yeah.
So we do have more of a legitimate expert who comes to us with a lot of different training, probably really a voracious reader on the subject too, right? So, you want to go by Jessie or Jessica? How do you?
Jess is fine.
Jess.
What's your middle name, Jess?
Lynn.
Lynn.
Jess Lynn.
Jess Lynn.
Is that cool?
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, it works.
Okay, good. Yeah. Good.
So tell us a little bit about kind of your experience before corrections.
Sure. So I'm from Washington State originally. I always like to start with that because we talk fast and drink a lot of coffee. It's for real. Starbucks culture. She's shaking. She knows. Yeah. So yes.
Now, was that Black Sheep? Was that take place in Washington State? I'm remembering the lady running for governor was like Washingtonians.
And it rains all the time.
And she was trying to chop down trees and she couldn't do it. She said, "Don't let anybody tell you your job's easy."
I need to probably see that. I know. I forget the movies.
My references get so old and nobody understands it anymore.
It's fine. It's fine.
How old are you again, Luke?
I'm really, really close to 40. I'm like this close.
40s
By the time this
30s.
podcast airs, I'll have a lot more.
It'll be your birthday. So I'm from, University of Washington, where I went to school. This was a satellite campus. I always say I wasn't quite like University of Washington, Seattle, where John Gottman's from.
Hey, I went to U of I, the lesser-known Springfield. So
yeah,
I get you.
So it doesn't really matter on the diploma, right? It says University of Washington. So that's where Dr. John Gottman is from. He's the guru of couples. So I realized just kind of in my own relationship, I had a failed marriage. For me, I say failed. So I got divorced at 25. At the time, I was in social work school. I was working in child protective services. I was doing all the things, and I realized I got really burnt out. And I was just helping, and the relationships I was drawn to was helper. So I remembered in grad school, they taught us a lot about Gottman, and that's where I went to school. So I was like, hey, maybe I should, instead of trying to help other people, I should try to figure out how to work my own stuff out so I can be a better social worker and helper. So in that pain, I actually got motivated on how to apply Gottman in my relationships. And I promised myself eventually, fast forward when I met my airman husband from Washington State, that we would do the work and we would take breaks, that we do what Gottman research explained to me in my studies to do. Like if you're flooded, you're over, and I don't want to get into it too much, but taking breaks when you're flooded is a huge thing that saved being married to a first responder and me being one. So yeah. I don't like the really long.
So that's
answer.
so cool. Your close connection to Gottman. I have a very, very small connection to Gottman. Back during my master's internship, I did the level 1 training with a guy who was kind of, one of his regional trainers, and really, really fell in love with it because it's user friendly. It's not hokey, and it's very, very evidence based. And the thing that I think really changed my mind or sold me on it, whatever you want to say. So we were watching all these videos of the research. So they got these grants, and they had tons of these apartments, and they were putting couples, whether they were together a year, 10 years, whether they said they were happy or they were sort of on the rocks. So just a nice representative sample. And even a lot of LGBT couples, too, which was kind of new for the time.
Yeah, it was.
And just studied the living crap out of them. I mean, just watched everything they did. It sounds like a nightmare if you're that couple. But, what they learn and just little body tells, like you said, flooding. So maybe let's start there. Flooding. What does that mean? Give our audience who,
So if basically when we get home from work, right, and we've already had a crazy day. For me, I might feel exhausted being at home. I'm just exhausted, right? We don't walk home like screaming, but we're just like, we ain't got time for nonsense, right? So for me, if my husband's like, hey, how come you didn't clean the kitchen, right? And I'm like, babe, I just quickly can go 0 to 60. So what they found is couples who get to 100 beats per minute on their heart rate, that's called flooded. And there's all this research on that from Love Labs, from first responders in general, really realizing we release cortisol and we're like fight, flight, freeze, numb, fight, and it's that constant. So what we do in our house, I'm like, babe, it looks like you're really flooded right now. And he'll be like, I'm not flooded. All right, babe, don't let the door hit you. And we have it's basically a safe word. I don't know how to say it in like no man's terms, but basically just a way to say I need a break, right? And that has saved our marriage in 10 years, literally, because we have 2 little kids and it's chaos most days, right?
It's insane. I'm sure a lot of our folks, travel. Very few of our people that work in corrections are 10 minutes away. Many of them are an hour away. They carpool.
Right.
They may be working overtime. They're worried about the shift they have going on the next day. There's bills to pay. There's a soccer game or a baseball game for their kid. There's, some repair in the house that has to be done, some family thing this weekend. So their minds are busy. And then you come, so your tank's already empty from work. Right. You're pulling extra duties. There's not enough people. So your ability to handle it's less, and then you come home and get hit with that stress. You get flooded more quickly, and I didn't realize it was 100 beats per minute. So we talk about kind of normal resting heart rate is between 60 and 100.
It is. Yep.
And you can have a lot of variation. I mean, somebody knocks on the door, your heart rate can go up kind of quickly.
Or alarm clock, right? You're like, you know.
I know.
Yeah.
You know, one thing I will say when it comes to the correction aspect of that, I never really knew there was a name called flooding, right?
Yeah.
Like, I never thought.
You're thinking of flooding the cell.
Yeah,
You got somebody
kind of
flushing
like
the toilet.
that.
For me, it was just that overwhelmed feeling, right? And so, for the longest time, I didn't know how to communicate with Amanda. And then at some point, I then realized I should communicate it. And then my pride got in the way, right?
Yeah.
And so, for me, that was my biggest thing, because I don't want to tell you what happened at work.
Right.
Because when I get home, I just want to be left alone. Leave me alone. Don't talk to me. Get the girls out of the room. Let me go down to my entertainment room and not be bothered.
Yep.
And like you said, you have to have a safe word. You have to have something. And if something does happen at work, I'll bring it to her. It'll be, Joe, do you want a solution, or do you just want to talk?
Yep.
Diamond dogs mount up.
Yeah, Diamond dogs.
Yeah.
Ted Lasso reference.
Okay, I'm like, you lost me.
You're
But
gonna watch
I'm going to watch
after
this. I have no idea. Yeah,
If you haven't watched Ted Lasso, we've talked about it before.
We're not getting paid in
Yeah.
any way,
No,
shape,
no,
or
no.
form by anybody for this podcast, but it's just an amazing show.
Yeah, and so that's something I've learned, and it's taken me years to learn that.
Yeah.
But I just know in corrections at times, as an officer or as, even just, I'm talking security, because that's what I can relate to.
Yep.
As someone who works security, I don't want to let my spouse know I'm struggling with something.
Right.
And I'm overwhelmed or I'm flooded with emotions and flooded with just being drained from what I dealt with. I'm not going to talk to her about it.
When you think of it from even like a Freudian aspect or conservation of energy, right? You get flooded because your tank's low, and then the stress is really, really high.
Yeah.
So it sounds like, boy, if I open up that can of worms or talk about it, I'm already exhausted. I don't have the energy. You look at it another way, like when you are psychologically that stressed or psychologically aroused to a certain point, the average person has an IQ of 100. So we'll say 100, right? When you get to probably 100, 120 beats per minute, those cortisol levels, cytokine storms, you're suddenly 1 to 2 standard deviations lower on your ability to function. So you look at an IQ score of 85 to 70, you've got kind of borderline then to mild, what we used to call mental retardation, cognitive impairment.
Yeah.
Right? So your ability to reason and to ration when you're that overwhelmed is not very good either. And you go back to more what we call probably primitive methods, right?
6-year-old brain, like amygdala, right? Yeah.
Ugly face.
Yeah. And if you watch
stupid head,
and we watch
whatever.
couples fight, right? That's session 4. They actually get to fight, and I'm the fly on the wall. And I saw literally one lady flipped the other guy off via telehealth, and I was like, "Wait, are you flipping him off right now?" But they were so flooded. And then it came out like, we've been cussing at each other.
I just go to grocery stores to watch and kind of hide.
Go to Walmart.
Yeah. I get flooded in Walmart. I'm just saying, sorry for Walmart. But yeah.
One of my good buddies, he did a lot more couples counseling than me. And Joe Guzzi, if you're listening, he's out there. He tells a funny story of the most passive aggressive couple. They would never flip each other off or say a curse word to one another, but the guy would just the woman was talking and criticizing something, and he looks and he announces, "And now I turn my back on you."
So that's stonewalling.
I mean,
right?
it's just like a 3-year-old.
Yeah.
So what's stonewalling?
So when we're flooded, so they say for whatever reason, men tend to turn away. Women tend to be deer in the headlights, and we're just staring right at. We don't know why. Maybe it's culturally, or we're taught these things. I can tell you, I'll be like, okay, babe. And then I'm nothing there, right? That's just signs that we're flooded. There's the 4 horsemen. That's the 4th one.
I'm trying to think, of when I first started in corrections, all the arguments I had with my wife.
And you do have a Stonewall Jackson beard, too, so it fits.
Yeah.
It's on point.
Stonewalling.
It's nice.
Does she know when you're stonewalling?
Yeah, my hair sticks up like the back of a cat. Yeah. No, it is interesting that we're talking about this today, because it's a good way for me to reflect on how I was when I first started. And it was very much, and I'm only speaking of me personally, right, that caused me to flood and to allow the stonewall to happen. For me, it was my pride. And it was, I didn't want to acknowledge that you're right, right? So just say you're right on a topic, and we're in the middle of fighting. Back in the day, it was, you know what? If I can't have this discussion with you, I'm going to do everything I can to belittle you.
Okay.
And then at the end of it, I'm just going to turn my back on you. We're going to call it a day.
Yeah.
Now, and you know, guys, we mature later in life, and communication for me has opened
Hopefully.
up. Hopefully,
35, right?
Yeah, I got a
Car
year.
insurance
I have
rates?
1 year,
Okay.
right? But for me now, I'm the type of person in the middle of a discussion. Yeah. If I'm wrong, right? Because I'm very factual. Like, and if we're going to have an argument, provide facts, not just opinions, but provide facts. And at that point, when you do that, I will acknowledge in the middle of the argument, no matter how mad I am, all right, Jess, you're right.
Wow.
You're right.
That's good that you can actually shift to
It's
get to that.
It's hard, and
yeah.
it's something I have to do constantly with any type of communication I have with people, because I always think, what's the worst case scenario? Like, my mind thinks in different paths, right? If I say this, it's going to lead here. If I say that, it's going to lead there. If I acknowledge, because I know personally, if I'm right and I make a solid point, I want you to acknowledge that I'm right.
Question. What if I told you that everyone's right?
I would probably stonewall you right now.
Oh,
No.
But really, every couple, they're both right. It's values and personality that make it right. Like, if I'm more of an introvert, right? So here I am, like, hi, introvert, and I can't hide, right? My husband, he's more outgoing. He walks in this room, people are like, oh, there's Derek. They just love this charisma. But I can't tell him, I can't make his outgoingness be wrong or right. Like, it just is who he is. I can't shift him, right? So there's the piece of how do you compromise on something that's a value and personality? Because there's usually two circles, one that we give on, one that we can't, you know, and that's the work.
So if we take that situation of, you know, like the correctional officer person coming home, tank's low, the spouse comes to greet them, you know, maybe it's a little overwhelming.
Yeah.
Right? So that spouse wants to connect, right? We've been away from each other for 8, 9, 10 hours, right? I've got these things to tell you about the kids or the house. We need to solve these problems, right? They're not wrong in feeling that way.
No.
That's their need. That's what they want to do.
They want a ritual of connection, we call that.
Yeah, and that's what they need.
Yep.
And then the other person needs a time to kind of decompress before they connect. And
you know,
they're both right.
I want your thoughts on this. I was just at Decatur.
You don't have to answer. I think it's a trap.
I'm going with it. No. This is good. Okay.
I was just at Decatur Correctional Center.
Yeah.
And one thing a sergeant told me is that she listens to HZ frequencies, right? Just get it in the air. If you don't, I don't know how to explain it, so look it up, right?
Okay.
And so for me, it was something you can listen to while you're meditating or something like that. And so I have this,
YouTube.
I have this one channel on my iTunes that's about 10 minutes long.
Yeah.
And each song is 1 minute long. And so that's about a 5-10 minute drive to where I go to work.
Okay.
Because you're one of the rare few that doesn't have a large commute.
Yeah. I live in the same town where my
outside of the
facility's
town.
at. Yeah.
Which is good and bad. There can be both, right? Yeah.
And so I timed it perfectly that now when I listen to this, 'cause I listen to it all the time now.
Good.
When I go to work, I listen to this, and I bring positive energy towards me. And that's the whole point of this frequency. It's bringing positive energy towards you.
So what's your frequency, Kenneth?
Yeah.
I don't know how to call it. My phone's all the way by Amy.
Yeah.
I don't know what it's called.
It just shifts you a little,
Yeah,
maybe,
it
to kind of
shifts
get you.
Yeah,
So
it
like
calms me
calming
down.
sounds?
Yeah, it
I know
calms
there
you
was
down.
the Buddhist sounds. What do they use? Those like vases or
Yeah.
what are those things called?
Is there a gong involved? I don't
Yeah,
know.
there's a gong involved. So
There's a
normally,
gong,
like,
yeah.
if you see me pull into the parking lot and I have
They
it
call them
blaring,
healing sounds, right?
Yeah.
So kind of like you see people like lick their finger in the wine glass,
Yeah.
but they're larger bowls and they have some kind of like metal, you know, where they create these kind of
and
therapeutic
I also
sounds.
listen to it on the way home. So that for me, I try to have that energy while I go into work,
Okay.
and then when I get off work, I'm trying to find that
Yeah.
frequency to help me calm down for when I get home.
good. Yeah.
So I don't really take it out on the girls.
Yeah.
So you need a ritual, and I think
Yeah.
the compromise, maybe what you found is like it can't always cut into the time at home.
Yeah.
So you use that transition time to have the
Yeah,
ritual.
because we've talked about in the past, some people don't have music, some people have to have music, some
Right.
people have to have something for that decompression. For me, again, I've said it before, I was a DJ for like 10 years.
Yeah.
And so I
What was your name?
DJ Muscle Hamster.
That's awesome.
No big deal. DJ Joey
No big
V. But for me, it's always been music.
Yeah.
And I have to have something on that. When I'm really flooded or overwhelmed,
Yeah.
it's silent.
Yeah.
And when it's silent, that's when you're like, Joe's in a bad mood.
Right.
Like
I've had some of
yeah.
those days, and I'll have a 2.5 hour drive home from one of the facilities or something. I look up and I'm like, I haven't had the radio on. I haven't listened to one song and I didn't even get a phone call. I'm like,
Yeah.
where was my mind? You know, like, just sort of dissociated, just kind of like defragging a computer back in the old days.
Yeah. Which isn't necessarily bad. I mean, I have a coach. She told me at least the first 10 minutes of every drive going to work, I need to have silence. Because usually when it's chaos at home, we just need quiet. You know, I mean, when it's like 4 hours, after a while, you might be like, oh, okay, maybe I should do something, you know, from not dissociating every day. But like just to have a minute that it's just quiet and you could just appreciate what's going on around you and see the birds and the things.
Nice.
So
far we have covered flooding and kind of the next piece of that, stonewalling. So you said men tend to kind of stonewall, which kind of turn away, shut down. Women, I think you said, kind of run towards the headlights. Does Gotten have a term for it, or any more gender differences? He just calls them both stonewalling. I mean, they're both stonewalling. It just looks different. Yeah, so when I see couples fight, I'm like, well, you're looking right at him, but she's just not there. Yeah. She just stops.
No, yeah, I mean, I'm not putting me and my wife's, stuff out there, but it's one of the things that I can think about and realize that's exactly what she was doing.
Right. And fun fact, criticism, when me and my husband have learned about criticism, and we can stop it in its tracks. And how we learn from other Gottman people, they say, so women, it's not always gender, but it's like the more feeling type. Whoever's the more feeling type, they are more likely when they're flooded to criticize. So that's that you always or you nevers.
Yeah, those things.
You never clean
ideas.
the house. But we do it when we're stressed.
I really hope my wife doesn't watch this. She's gonna be like, Joe, that is you. You're the more emotional person, right? And you always criticize. And it was it's realizing that now. Yeah, and I think it changed when I started working in corrections as well.
Yeah,
like that's when, because I used to be a huge extrovert. Right. Like you can ask my family.
Well, you don't get a name like DJ Muscleham, so by being an
introvert. But now, if I don't really know you, or if I'm in a different situation, I'm genuinely more an introvert now.
Right.
I have to force myself to turn on that switch and be the extrovert.
I think a lot of us are that way, though.
Yeah.
That's burnout.
I realize that now.
I think.
Well, it sounds like you probably have learned to appreciate more long-standing, deeper relationships. Yeah. And we all have just this kind of bandwidth as you get older and you're working, you're a dad, you've got 2 kids, a wife, a job, and then, the staff wellness thing that a lot of time of yours is dedicated to that's unpaid. Podcasting, there's not a lot of bandwidth to give. It's not like when you're 20, 25 and your whole life is social. It'll never be like that again. You've got to really use those resources wisely.
When I get on the Xbox and I put my headphones on and I get the guys and we get in our squad, I always go, what incense do you guys want me to burn tonight while we're playing? And that incense calms me down as well. Not only am I doing that, but I also have incense going in the entertainment room.
Yeah.
Right?
So
awesome.
You're burning incense and playing Xbox. And you've got kids at home. I'm going to have to talk to your wife.
Don't.
It's fine.
She got me in on the incense thing. Now I like going to
I get it.
It's fun.
Champa, Yeah.
I don't like the patchouli hippie smell.
Yeah.
It doesn't smell like a hippie stuff.
Just need a little air freshener. That's all.
No. I like what I got going.
Yeah. So what I was going to say. So my husband, my tough guy.
Criticism,
right?
how you guys have learned to
so
stop
he'll
in his
say,
tracks.
hey, Jess, do I always or never, yada, yada, yada. He stops my criticism with grace in its tracks. And I'll be like, oh, you're right.
So how
he
does
says
he do
that? Oh, I always or never? Because he'll hear me say it. You
so
never clean the house. You're always farming or you're always working, right?
And then he would respond with, so do I really never clean the house?
And he's not being a jerk, but he's just because I've told him, hey, always and never is criticism. If we're going to help couples, we need to be well. We can't just be
So folks who haven't gone through the Gottman, that might have a different context.
Yeah, because...
I always, Jess, but because
love,
you guys know the Gottman, that's sort of triggering something for you. Lights are going on oh, yeah.
Because we have to watch a couple fight, and when I see criticism in that 4th video, I have to check it for criticism. So that's how we know always or never equals that. It's easier.
I know personally, if you would have done that to me 10 years ago.
Yeah.
And if I went at you and you said, Joe, do I always, to me, I would personally interpret that as you being condescending. Right? And so that's one thing that this job has changed, that any type of pushback like that for me, now you're just being condescending.
So it's
and
tricky.
Now you're opening that door for me to blow up on.
But this is how you and your husband have managed it, right?
But we have to have it when we're not fighting, though. You know what I mean? It's it's a thing we make ahead of time.
So don't do it while we're fighting.
Like, don't be like, hey, let's plan how I can call you out on you criticizing, like, while you're flooded. Like, that won't. Because we're 6 years old when we're flooded, so it ain't going to help.
Yeah,
You know
so
what I mean?
maybe another couple says, hey, I feel like we're really not sticking to, like, productive discussion. We're kind of getting in attack mode. Do you feel the same way?
Yeah.
Could it be something like
Yeah.
that?
Or what do you need, babe? Because I feel like you're really flooded. Or I feel like you're really overwhelmed right now. He's like, I just need to go tinker in the garage. All right, honey. He says tinker, and I can't get that mad. You know what I mean?
Tinker.
What's tinkering even mean in the garage?
It means it could be 30 minutes or 4 hours until Papa
I have
comes
no.
in there.
He just has so many projects. I just love
Reorganize
this.
I think
so many projects.
I think just what we face working behind the wall, right?
Yeah.
Is that we always feel like we always have to handle a situation, right? And we always feel like we're on edge because we're always fighting, or there could be discussion, or something could blow up in our faces at work. And so I think that was hard for me to understand initially when I first took this job, to separate that.
Right.
I mean, I will tell you left and right, it's always going to follow you home. I genuinely believe our job will always follow you home. And your personal life will always follow you to work. Just my opinion. But I genuinely believe that. But I also feel that realizing that, like that, just like that, when you said, make sure when you ask the always and never, don't do it during the discussion. Because that's when it will be interpreted as being a condescending person.
Yeah.
Wait your hour.
The bear's at the cave.
Yeah.
You shouldn't be like, hey, let's sit down and talk about it.
You know, back when my wife and I had some rougher fights and stuff, you know, it'd be like, well, gosh, if it was always, then certainly you can provide me a couple of pieces of anecdotal evidence. Yeah. And that was just my little smart ass mouth. Like, well, if it's always, then by God, the last 3 days, you should have something in your calendar where I've done it. And that was me knowing that, of course, I don't do it always, and trying to just get that one up, which wasn't really moving towards like a resolution. It was, you know, like I always say, you can be right or you can make it right.
You can.
And take your pride, but then you're going to have it by yourself in, you know, your own room with no company, no connection.
Right. So what you were just describing, I would code that as defensiveness. Right?
I'm not defensive. Get out of here.
So, but what...
And the stonewall happens.
The cure for defensiveness, and I have to remind myself this because I love some defensiveness too. It's fun. Because you just like want to win, right? We want to win.
Yeah.
So I have to ask myself repeatedly.
Love a good argument.
Oh my gosh, it's so fun, right? It is, but not when you have like 1% left in the cup. Like, let's fight about our kids tonight. You're like, okay, it's fine. But I have to ask myself, what can I own in this? Like what's any, like 1% of this conversation that he is actually, that I actually am right about and he's actually right about?
Good point. Yeah.
Like our issue, our gridlock is discipline, and we've worked a lot on discipline, right? His dad was an officer. So you do what he said, like you do what the kids say because you don't want to go to prison. You have to respect authority, right? And I used to teach kids, like, and parents how to like parent before we had kids, right? I was like, here, parents, this is how you parent. It's very humbling. Now that I have kids, I'm like, oh, what was I thinking? But the point is, we have different ways about discipline. We both don't want our kids to go to prison, though, right?
No,
we have
probably
the same
not.
goal.
No, please no.
But he's like, kids, like, do, right? And I'm like, baby,
he has a different
like,
roadmap.
They're like just
we get
playing
there
with
by
the
very
chickens.
subscribed rituals.
Totally.
Yeah.
So we've had to work a lot on what's our compromise. So for us, he has to yell. I know, and you went like that. I watch your face. He has to try 3 times of telling the kids to listen before he can raise his voice. And this has been an ongoing.
Did you guys set this podcast episode?
No. This is just our gridlock.
We've had like 2 emails.
This is 10 years
said,
of
hey,
marriage.
we're going to be at the Mount Zion
This
thing.
is 10 years.
Man, I mean that.
And your wife has not contacted me. I've never
That'd
talked
be
to her in my
so
life.
challenging to do.
It's all of our. I mean, that's our thing.
Yeah.
Of telling Anna and Eleanor 3 times to stop.
I know.
Calmly.
Yeah, we have. I had to go through like all this Adlerian parenting stuff. We had to teach classes, of course, before I had kids.
Oh, yeah.
It's like who's going to want to come?
Just
listen?
don't tell him you don't have kids.
Yeah.
You're fine.
But you know, I think we try to do that. Like, I don't know that we set it to 3, but it's kind of like corrections. This is your second direct.
I'm firm when I say
direct order.
Like, I don't start off yelling. It's, hey,
I'm giving you an
need to
ODR right
stop,
now.
Right.
Or you're going to go to your room.
Right.
Right? And
Yeah.
then, like, second time I get a little bit louder.
Yeah.
Third time I get a little bit louder.
Yeah.
And then after the third time, if you're not listening, Dad goes full-blown sergeant mode yelling at you.
I understand. And the tricky part is they get flooded, the kids get flooded, I get flooded. When we're married to, like, me and my husband were both first responders. So he gets I feel like I get more hypervigilance with his 0 to 60 because I'm like somehow managed more. I don't know. It's probably my own stuff, whatever.
Yeah.
I'm sure he gets some hypervigilance, but he's like, she's got the team. It's like Air Force mentality. I don't know. But like he literally, there's something that happens like yesterday, the kids were throwing chickens in the air because we have these chickens.
Like live chickens?
Like our chicken. Yeah. She's like, the chicken's going to fly. And like to our 8-year-old. And my husband's like, stop throwing that. Like it was a safety thing.
Instant.
Right?
Like
because
instant,
that
yeah.
safety is when he's allowed to yell.
Okay.
But I'm like, safety. I mean, yeah, I get it. You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah,
running in the
we've had
streets.
the joke as like therapists, like when your patient's running into the street or jumping out of a window, it's not time to ask them how they feel about that.
Yes.
You grab them by the belt loops and pull them back in.
So it's a chicken danger moment, I guess. So
And we talk about that in Adlerian parenting too. Like we like natural consequences where just sort of the laws of nature enact the consequence. But sometimes those are too, like you can't let the chicken die because you're throwing the air, or
And
you
they're
can't run out in the
layers.
street and get hit by a car.
Yeah.
So then we enact a logical consequence
Right.
that can be that can make sense.
Right. And they're cash money layer chickens, apparently. So we don't want the chickens to die.
Well,
so,
eggs are expensive now.
And we're
really
going to have
expensive.
chickens. Lots of chickens. Yeah. So yeah, I don't know if you kind of got where I was going with the idea that there's two circles, and that's what the biggest work that the Gottman counselor can do is get to a place of compromise on perpetual, ongoing issues, and we all have perpetuals.
And that's gridlock, the perpetual stuff.
Yes, so we all have
the
perpetuals.
kind of topics that tend to maybe agree but not fully, and
Yes.
just tend to.
Yeah.
You're never going to get the other person to totally sway in your
No.
direction.
It's
So
a
that
value.
requires a compromise.
Right. Yep. And it takes sometimes a third person, not your mom or your distant cousin, to be involved. Someone who can be neutral in it.
And so, sounds like you guys have some strategies for that by identifying values. Kind of, these are our shared values, so let's focus on that.
Yeah.
That's something we can.
Right.
Now, what about, we talked about defensiveness a little bit. You pointed out that, like my little one-upper, kind of whatever you want to call it, was probably defensiveness.
It is.
What do you help couples with when someone is kind of being defensive?
I just say, so I'm kind of the bug in the ear when they're talking, and I'll say, hey, what part of that can you own? Person who's getting defensive. What part of it? I kind of try to say it quiet. Oh,
It's
you're
like, you don't have to
right.
believe it all, but there's
Yeah.
something in there that
Yeah.
might have a little bit of a sweet
Yeah.
spot of truth.
Yeah. Like, you're right, I didn't show up on time. But I didn't show up because the house was dirty. And like, that could be a whole other piece. But right now, we're just going to what you can own. It's okay, because we all think we're right. They always want me to be a mediator, and I'm not there to do that. I'm there to teach them strategies and get out.
No, that's right.
know?
I mean, we have I think a really strong relationship, my wife and I, but some of the things you'd fight about, like if somebody asked you the next day, you probably couldn't even put your finger on them. They're so minuscule.
Right.
But some of those gridlocks that you kind of just get sucked into because you haven't found a strategy. But one of the things that, we've been able, I guess we don't say like what part can you own, but when you recognize just some kind of feeling that the person is having, like that's a valid thing.
Yeah.
Whether I didn't clean the house enough or did this too much or whatever, but like you feeling overwhelmed is legitimate.
Yeah.
So let's focus on that. That's the thing we
Exactly.
agree. You seem to be upset.
Yeah.
We need to figure out a way that I can help more or you can help more here.
Yeah. Or when in doubt, say, what do you need?
Yeah.
It's like the easiest thing in the universe, but there's all this research on porcupines that we don't even have to get into that today, but literally they found when, like, there's a whole porcupine talk, but basically when you can say, what do you need to your partner, it sort of like just relaxes them.
The prickles fall down.
Yeah.
The quills.
Yeah.
Quills.
Which is what porcupines
No, that's great
did,
advice.
but-
That's great
Yeah.
advice. Like
I found